The for-in loop. This control flow structure will allow us to execute a block of code for a fixed number of times. It will iterate through a block of code for a fixed number of times. Remember, indentation is very important in Python. So all the code that you would like to be executed as part of the for loop should be indented within the for loop block of code. The general syntax for a for-in loop is as follows. For iterator variable in sequence statements to be executed. The iterator variable is a temporary variable that stores the particular count or instance of the loop. This is to ensure that the loop functions works as expected. It is the variable that is used to store the count position of the specific instance. The sequence is the set of information that we are trying to cycle through. The logic is similar to saying, you are trying to reach into and eat a packet of chips. In the above scenario, you are undergoing a for loop. There is a fixed number of things, single chips in the sequence, packet of chips. Maybe there's like 100 chips or so, which means that it will eventually come to an end. And each time you eat one chip, then the count of your chip is increasing, which means that you are going further into the loop, thereby reaching the end of the execution, eating. In the same way as we go through a sequence, the iterator variable helps us to keep count of how many items we went through and the next item that is in line, that is due for processing. A very common sequence that is used in conjunction with the for-in loop in Python is the range function. The range function in Python will take in two very important parameters or arguments. As we know, this is the start value and an end value. Both will be in the integer data type. The third parameter is called the step. This is the value that the count will increase by each time the loop is executed. By default, it is +1. The range function is inclusive of the start value and exclusive of the end value. So since we wanted to print hello world to the screen 5 times, we passed in 0, 5. This means that it will print out the message to the screen for the values 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the 5 times. So, for example, if I would like to print hello world to the screen 5 times consecutively, then I would do so as follows. For I in range 0 to 5, print hello world. I is representing the iterator or temporary variable that stores the count of the repetition process. 0, the value at which the repetition begins. The range is inclusive of this value. 5, the value at which the repetition ends. The range is not inclusive of this value. The for-in loop structure in Python. Print hello world. These are the lines of code to be executed during each iteration. Before I provide you with the full explanations for the for-in loop syntax, I would like to show you the output to the simple block of code on the previous slide. Output to the previous block of code will show as follows. Hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world. First, I would like to mention, notice that we passed in a range of 0 and 5. This is actually the range function in Python. It is built into Python. The range function in Python will take in two very important parameters or arguments. As we know, this is the start value and an end value. Both will be in the integer data type. The range function is inclusive of the start value and exclusive of the end value. So since we wanted to print hello world to the screen 5 times, we passed in 0, 5. This means that it will print out the message to the screen for the values of 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the 5 times. You see the I in for I in range 0 to 5. The I can be seen as a temporary variable in which we are storing the current count representing the iteration number. I should mention that iterate means to repeat. Hence, iteration simply means repetition. And also, for your understanding of the way in which the logic works, it is exactly as we have been doing thus far. That is, Boolean true and false. Here, the line for I in range 0 to 5 is the one that is being tested as a condition. So it's essentially when we ran our script, the line of code for I in range 0 to 5 evaluated as a Boolean true. Why? It is because the value of I will be the value that you provide as the start value. I have provided the range 0 to 4. 5 is not included. Hence, the starting value of I is 0. And with I holding the value of 0 during the first iteration, the range 0 to 5 criteria is still met. Therefore, a Boolean true is received in the backend processes, which allows the interpreter to enter the contents of the for loop block and execute it all. I takes on the value of the current iteration. Now, after the contents of the for loop has been executed, in our case a single message that says hello world, the temporary variable that stores the count undergoes an increment. Increment means that the value is increased, default by 1, right? 1. Therefore, during the first iteration, I has a value of 0. Upon reaching the end, it was incremented and became 1. The program logic returns to the condition for I in range 0 to 5. But this time, the value of I is 1. 1 is between the range 0 and 4. 5 is not included. Hence, a Boolean true is received and the code within the for loop is executed. The value of I undergoes an increment to become 2. 2 is between the range 0 and 4. 5 is not included. Therefore, a Boolean true causes us to enter the contents of the for loop. Upon reaching and executing the last line of code within the for loop, the value of I is incremented. It becomes 3. 3 does fall between the range of 0 and 4. Remember, 5 is not included, and therefore we will obtain a Boolean true to enter the for loop and execute all code within. Upon doing so, I undergoes an increment and becomes 4. 4 is between the range of 0 and 4. 5 is not included, thereby causing us to enter the for loop and execute the code within. This means that after printing hello world to the screen, the value of I will undergo an increment. I will become 5. During this particular iteration, however, I hold the value of 5. 5 does not fall between the range of 0 and 4. 5 is not included, and therefore a Boolean false will be obtained, causing the interpreter to bypass the entire for loop. This is when our program reaches the end of its runtime. To greatly increase your understanding of the concept of the for loop, I shall provide you with a simple diagram. The diagram follows in the next slide. For loop iterations range 0 to 5. Iteration 0, iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3, and iteration 4. I should mention to you that the possibilities of programming brought forward by the for loop are endless and very powerful. I have used a simple example for explanation purposes. Let us code another program that is a bit more sophisticated. I also mentioned in an earlier tutorial that each concept builds on and is used in conjunction with another. It is through learning one concept and we will gain insight into other concepts and techniques. I shall provide another relatively complex example that shows us the for loop in action. Please pause the tutorial now and take a moment to look at the program below before moving on to the next slide. Look at the lines of code, write down or think about what we are doing in each line. The main objective is to try and understand the logic of the program. Print, welcome to the student marks calculator program. Number of students is equal to int input. How many marks do you wish to enter? Total marks is equal to 0. For I in range 0, number of students, mark is equal to int input. Please enter the student's mark. Total marks is equal to total marks plus mark. Print the total of all student marks plus string total marks. Print the average of all student marks plus string total marks over 10. If you have taken time to analyze the program shown on the previous slide, you will notice: number 1, we print a welcome message to the screen using the print function. Number 2, we request input from the user using the input function. To ensure that the user provides input of integer data type, that is whole numbers, we enclose the input in an int function. The value provided here will be saved in a variable called number of students. Next, we created a variable and have assigned a value of 0 to it. These processes are called variable declaration, providing a name, and variable initialization, providing an initial value, respectively. Number 4, we then proceeded to set up a for loop. The start value we will provide is 0, and the end value will be the value that the user entered, that is, the number of students that they wish to enter marks for into the system. Number 5, within the for loop, we request for user input. Specifically, we request for the mark obtained by the student, and to ensure that integer data type is provided, we enclose the input function in an int function. The value entered by the user in that particular instance or iteration will be stored in a variable called mark. Next, we set total marks to be equal to total marks plus marks. This means that we take the variable total marks and we set it to be equal to the current value of total marks plus mark. Finally, to conclude the program, we output two pieces of statistical information to the user about student marks. Number 8. Specifically, we print the total amount of marks obtained by all students collectively. We do this by printing a message of string data type and concatenating the string form of total marks to the statement. As you may see, to ensure that we are concatenating a string data type to another string data type, we enclose the value of total marks in a string function. Number 9. We also print out a message depicting the average of all student marks and concatenate the value to the text. Once again, we have enclosed the calculation in a string function to ensure that we are concatenating a string to another string. Number 10. This marks the end of our program. Let us try our program. I shall run the program and enter a value of 3 for the number of marks I wish to enter. For student marks, I shall use 48, 43, 46. I shall assume that the test is out of 50. You may use any values that you like. The execution and output to our program shows as follows. Welcome to the Student Marks Calculator program. How many marks do you wish to enter? 3. Please enter the student's mark 48. Please enter the student's mark 43. Please enter the student's mark 46. The total of all student marks is 137. The average of all student marks is 13.7. Upon execution of the script as seen in our output, we are able to see: number 1, a welcome message that has been printed to the screen. Number 2, next, the program requests us for input. We have entered a value of 3. We wish to enter 3 marks into the system. Number 3, we entered 3 marks consecutively into the system. I wish to bring your focus on the total of all student marks and the mathematics that is taking place within the for loop. You see, when we enter 48 and press enter, total marks is equal to total marks plus mark. What this means is that the new value of total marks is going to be equal to the previous value of total marks plus the value of the mark that was entered. So simply put, new value of total marks is equal to earlier value 0, we set it to be 0, plus mark 48 gives us a new value of 48. Then on the second iteration we entered a value of 43. Therefore, new value of total marks is equal to earlier value 48 plus mark 43. This will be equal to 91. Then on the third and final iteration, we entered a mark value of 46. This means that total marks is equal to previous value of total marks 91 plus mark 46. This was the final iteration, and therefore the value of total marks becomes 91 plus 46 is equal to 137. This accounts for the statement that we see, which says the total of all student marks 137. Number 6. The next statement simply takes the value of total marks, which is 137, and divides it by 10 to tell us the average of all, in our case, 3 student marks. I do hope that you are understanding the logic behind our program. Number 8. You see, from my personal point of view, if one understands the logic behind the program events and syntax, then one will not have any difficulty coding in the programming language.